What if the problem isn't you? What if you're in the wrong room? My suspicion? You're not broken and you don't need to be fixed. You've outgrown where you are. Let's get more space and freedom to redesign the life you deserve. Welcome to the Reinvention Room. I'm Allison Hare, podcast launch strategist for ambitious leaders, and we are rethinking everything we've been taught. Part pop culture, part real talk, and all smarter ways to live life on your own terms. Let's talk about the elephant in the gender studies room. Something weird is happening in the culture right now. The data is really loud, and the extremes are even louder. And today, we're going to talk about all of them. Why are men rushing back to the manosphere? Did you know, this is so crazy, that Gen Z is going back to church more than millennials and Gen X. It's been a really interesting resurgence. Why is it so hard for women to find a good man? Is there really a shortage? Why are women ditching the workplace to be prairie core wearing bread making homemakers? And how did Trump win so many marginalized people over? And if you're watching from the middle like I am, all of it's a little confusing. It's fascinating. And honestly, it's all really interconnected. And that is what today is going to be about. In this episode, we are not about to pit one side against the other. But what we're doing is we're going to synthesize the information in a way that all of a sudden, all the things that are stressing you out and giving you agita, now it makes sense. So I'm going to help put all of these pieces together in a way that you understand how it affects your real life, how you partner, how you parent, how you work, how you lead, what you believe in, and how you make sense of your own identity in a time when everything kind of feels up for grabs. And I think that uncertainty, they call it toxic uncertainty. It's actually a thing in the zeitgeist of that feeling of like, I don't know, is AI going to take my job? Am I going to be with my partner? Am I going to have money? Am I going to have retirement? Are we going to be okay? Is my family going to come back together? Are we going to be politically divided? Are we going to be okay as Americans or wherever you live in the world? So there's so many of these things that are coming out. And what I love to do is to kind of tap into what's happening and figure out from a data perspective, why is this happening? And all of a sudden, it makes a lot more sense. And so this one is going to be layered, and I promise it's going to make you understand in a way where you actually feel empowered. Because honestly, I think that everything is kind of pointing to an avoidance of pain. I'm going to put a pin in this. We're going to come back to it. But I think the way that we are adjusting to this is like, how do we avoid pain? Because all of this feels really heavy. It feels really uncertain. And, you know, today we're really talking about kind of the genders, the roles of genders, and why things feel so confusing. And I was thinking about when I was a teenager, and my mother didn't teach me this. But I remember, like, I'm thinking about how we were socialized as girls, right? You play with dolls, you act a certain way, you need to not be too loud, not be too boastful, kind of not take up a lot of space, be as skinny as possible. You remember in the 90s was the waif movement. And believe it or not, they say that in Republican regimes that usually thin is in. And part of that is like taking up less space. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. But certainly in the 90s, that was the case where it was to be as small as possible, to not be too loud. And, you know, when I thought about what we were brought up on in the 90s, when you think of, not Ben Stiller, Adam Sandler, when you think of Adam Sandler movies or any of those movies that were coming out, obviously Adam Sandler was the funny, likable character in Happy Gilmore and all of the movies that he was in, Billy Madison. And the women were always blonde. They were always pretty. They were always thin. They were always pleasant, but very two-dimensional. Their role in all of the movies in the 90s was to be pleasant objects of desire, attractive, but never too loud. They never had much depth to them. Whereas now, TV shows, movies, programming is all way layered, so much deeper. You know, even things like Righteous Gemstones, where it seems very kind of on the surface, just these goofball religious family, but you start to realize there's so much depth among them. So I think as an entertainment piece, we've come a long way. But what the messaging was growing up was very confusing. Like, my mother was a stay-at-home mom of 6 kids, and my father is an immigrant and an entrepreneur and traveled all over the world. And so my mom was theoretically single momming it because my father was off traveling, and eventually they got divorced. So she truly was a single mom with no income and with no marketable skills at the time, right? Like, this is pre-internet. And so the messaging from my mom, she would always say, never rely on a man to make money, always make your own. Because my mom didn't make that choice and she regretted it. And I think even the messaging in the culture then was, you're a girl, you can do anything you want. You can go to college, you can vote, you can drive. You know, like, it's not that long ago that we were able to vote and have our own credit cards. And so for her and for our moms, there was liberation ahead. And so we're socialized to believe you can do anything, but don't get fat, don't talk too loud, don't be too confident, take up as little space as possible, be thin, don't rock the boat, and always in some kind of servant to the patriarchal society of which we know. This is all we know, right? For centuries. And so I was thinking even about when I was a teenager and I would go for a sleepover and I would have a bag by my head, my purse, and in that purse would be a makeup bag. And the moment I would wake up, I would pull that makeup bag towards me. I would go in the bathroom, I'd put on lipstick, I'd put on eyeliner, I'd put on blush, I'd put on mascara every single day. I could not bear the thought of somebody seeing me without makeup. And I was a teenager. I would have the under eye concealer, and that was always the way. My mom didn't teach me that. But the socialization that I had to present a certain way, and then it kind of leads into, as a romantic partner, I was always trying to figure out how to be picked, right? I was the pick-me girl. I think a lot of us were. And that's what we were socialized. Like, you need to be pleasing, you need to be smart, go to college, do all the things, you know, make your own money, but also you want to get picked, you want to get married, because if you are too much, he's not going to want you. He's not going to want to keep you around. He's not going to want to have babies with you. He's not going to want to make a family with you. You're going to be alone and you're going to be an old maid forever, right? That was literally the kind of messaging that we heard. So confusing. And what has happened is that a lot of us, and I imagine if you're listening to this, you are probably similar to me, a high-performing woman that probably had to overprove yourself in every single room you have ever been in. And you did. Every time, right? There's a lot of unraveling. There's a lot of unraveling that happens with that. And what has happened, and what all the data shows, is that we have gone to college, we've gotten educated, We are making more money, still not to the level of our male counterparts yet, societally. But in many cases, we are making more money, and sometimes more money than our partners. And what is showing is that 60% of people in college are women for the first time ever. We are outpacing men in terms of education. All this will come in context in a minute. And so we are to a point where we have gotten educated. We don't need a man for money. We can make our own. And we can create a life with a person, with a partner, but it's not dependent on somebody else, right? It doesn't complete us. And not only that, we're also doing the healing work on ourselves. So there was a study that was done, and it's called the Lost Boys study. And the Lost Boys study is from, what is it? I want to find it. The Center for Social Justice. It's a UK-based organization. And what they found is that this Lost Boys thing has really changed everything. That men are in a position now where they are struggling. Men are struggling. And so I don't want to, like the belief is, well, men have had it from a patriarchal society forever. Cry me a river, right? But it's not that, it shouldn't be dismissed. It should not be dismissed because all of this plays into each other. And so there are now educational and economic disparities, meaning boys are underperforming academically. They have higher expulsion rates and lower university attendance compared to girls. And young men are more likely to be unemployed or economically inactive. And then there are mental health concerns. This part is bananas to me, that suicide is now the leading cause of death among men under 50. Suicide, the leading cause of death. And then the social disconnection that happens, that many young men are feeling marginalized, leading to reactionary ideologies. This is where we start to get the interconnection between the political and the rush to the manosphere, because Trump and the manosphere, Joe Rogans, the Andrew Tates of the world have said like, hey, I hear you and you're right. You're right. There are opportunities no longer available to you. And the truth is that men are struggling. And again, this is all based on data and research, and I will link it in the show notes so you can see it for yourself. This isn't just my opinion of what's happening here. But the social disconnection aspect, many years ago, I saw a documentary on men, and it was by Jennifer Newsom. So Gavin Newsom's wife is a documentarian. She's very, very well respected. She partnered with Maria Shriver on a couple of documentaries. One of them was called The Mask You Live In. I saw it a few years ago, and it literally changed my life. Now, I'm not a young boy, right? But I have a young boy. I have a 12-year-old son. And at the time when I saw this, essentially what this documentary was showing is that boys are socialized to have only two emotions, okay? And like pissed, angry, right? Oh, or okay. Those are it. There is no crying, right? You're not allowed to cry. Boys don't cry. You're a wuss. You're a pussy. You're a, insert whatever slur you have. You're gay. It's crazy to me that even in 2025, the amount of times I hear the slur in middle school and high school of you're gay, And that's still going on. And I'm like, really? We haven't evolved at all? Like, being gay is cool to me. Like, being gay is they're free. They're free to be who they are. And I think that can be a threat to people. I think it could be a threat to be allowed to express yourself as you feel and feels aligned for you. And I kind of want to protect that. But anyway, this documentary was showing that because there is no way to fully express. So if we all have this wide range of emotions, if we're thinking of a spectrum, men only have this tiny little, they only have this tiny little spectrum that is socially acceptable for them to express themselves. So where does all of that emotion go? Where does all of that emotion that is never expressed go? If you believe in the concept of the body keeps the score, it has to go somewhere. And what they found is that the crime rates go up, abuse rates go up, the inability to be able to have a healthy outlet to truly express yourself, whether it's sad, mad, angry, frustrated, whatever it is, or even just joyful or happy. It depends, right? Like excitement. There's like a very limited way that it has to come out somewhere. And so they're tying all of these kind of socializations to higher suicide rates and dropping out of school, bad grades in school, or getting expelled from school, or not getting jobs, not getting what they want in life. And just, again, the mental health challenge is all tied to it. It's such an interesting perspective on what's happening with boys. And I remember hearing a podcast about this specific masculinity debate. What is masculinity? You have the concept of toxic masculinity, which we've heard a lot about. And I don't know that it's so fair to call everything toxic masculinity. But then there's also an antithesis to this, which is called tonic masculinity. And that is somebody that is kind of like Tim Walz, right? Like a guy that is going to help his neighbor out, or fix a flat tire, or help a woman crossing the street, and also have emotions as well, where it's a much more pleasant, kind of less aggressive way. But what has come out of this, which I think is so beyond fascinating, is the concept of incels. So you may have heard that word, and a lot of it is kind of tied to Andrew Tate. So Andrew Tate is this male figure that like brazenly talks about hurting women and that they deserve it, that they are deserving of it. And he has this massive platform. He's been deplatformed in places, but again, with censorship or non-censorship, it goes away, it comes back, and Trump is in office and giving free passes to people kind of in this space. It's really fascinating what's happening. And so there is this concept of incels. Incel stands for involuntarily celibate, meaning girls aren't going to bang them. Girls aren't going to pay any attention to them. And they start to internalize that as, well, fuck women. Fuck women. Fuck them. They're bitches. And so there's a whole world of people that you would think are like kind of fringe, you know, maybe even almost dismissive of this population of people. But all of these fringe groups, I think we need to pay a lot closer attention to why it's happening and not be so easily dismissive of them. And incels are one. And a lot of them, there is a lot more violence. There is a lot more suicidal ideation, a lot of frustration, a lot of pent up rage that either will come out or not, but it can be very, very scary. The kind of threats that they make, whether they are carried out or not, is a different story. But I want to bring this back to Why? Because it feels like a little bit of a dark picture, right? But from a compassionate perspective, if there are people that are literally being unseated where they do feel like there aren't jobs for them, if they're not as educated, and AI is coming, and there are factory jobs that are going away, and they're living in the basement trying to make ends meet. Things are not easy for a lot of the young men. If less and less are educated, right? And more women are educated. So you see kind of like this decline of men and this increase, this incline of women, where women are like, we're doing it all. Like, we're going to get healed. We're going to go to a therapist. We're going to get, we're going to be beautiful. We're going to be able to pay for ourselves. We're going to get the good jobs. We're going to fight and claw our way to a place where we don't need to rely on somebody else. Never rely on a man to make money. Always make your own. That was the messaging that I heard. And even for me, I remember I was working with a coach. Her name is Elise Archer. I love her. She's been on my podcast twice. And I remember we had a private conversation. We were in a private coaching relationship. And I was telling her about that. And she said, Allison, that's abusive. And I was like, what? It's not abusive. Never rely on a man to make money. Always make your own. She's like, you might want to reconsider that. And I said, well, what do you mean? I was like, my mom didn't abuse me. And she said, it can be abusive because you're being taught that the world isn't safe. The world is not safe unless you handle everything. And I thought, well, fuck. Could that be true? And so when I left my corporate career, 3 years ago. I was working in technology sales, had a, good steady job, 401k, ESPP, employee stock purchase, all of the trappings that I was told to do. And I left my corporate career on purpose with no plan. I don't recommend this approach at all. But the kind of unraveling that happened in my head that, we are a 2-income family. I want to make no mistake. We are a 2-income family. And I took a very big income completely away with no plan and no idea how or when I would, or if I would ever make that kind of money again. And I had to rely on my husband. And the kind of mental gymnastics of being able to, of doing that. And again, there is a certain bit of privilege. And I think because I had invested so well and it had stock purchase and all of that, it really helped us and has helped us, as I build something completely from scratch, or I've built something completely from scratch, which I have done. But it got a little dicey. It got a little dicey emotionally, all of it, financially. I just feel like when you get to like your 40s, like shit just gets real. And you start to realize like, wait a minute, all that shit we learned, it was bullshit, wasn't it? So who's the real me? Who is the real me? And so why I think this kind of intersects with the rise of the tradwife movement is really fascinating. So again, people who listen to this podcast, generally speaking, I know you are a badass. You're ambitious. You care about making a difference in the world. You care about getting this life thing right. You care about the people you love. Like, this isn't just a dress rehearsal. Like, it's really real for you. I'm guessing, but I think it is. And then I think about the tradwife movement. So if you're familiar with what a tradwife is, or if you are not, I actually did a whole episode on it. The first episode of 2025 was on tradwives. I could talk about tradwives forever. I could talk about cults and tradwives forever and ever and ever. And like shit I see on Netflix. Those are like my poison, right? Podcasting. I could talk about podcasting forever. But a tradwife is defined as a traditional wife. Now, it's different. It isn't, generally speaking, these are women that are opting to either stay home or leave their corporate job to stay home. It's different from like somebody who chooses like, hey, it works for my lifestyle better to be a stay-at-home mom, right? It works better for my life. This is what I want. This is my purpose. This is what I want. It's different from that. The tradwife has a lot more, there are people that are typically stay-at-home moms. A lot of times they will choose to homeschool their kids. But the interesting part is that the concept is more ideological of, you know, I get the allure of like, I went to college, I worked my ass off. I am working and somebody else is raising my kids so I can work, right? I want to do that. And you're burned out and you're anxious and you're stressed and your time stretched, right? I see the appeal to want to go home. But the ideological part that kind of defines a tradwife, and tradwife is kind of a polarizing word. It's a polarizing term. It can be controversial. So it can be controversial because it typically runs more right wing or conservative leaning. It has political undertones. It has a lot of religious undertones. Again, this is not a blanket statement, but I'm just kind of generalizing from an understanding perspective. But the tradwife is more to be subservient to your husband. And so your role, I was reading something from Emily Amick. So Emily, I don't know, it's Amick or Amick. She does a Substack and has an email list. It's called Emily in Your Phone. And she does some really interesting commentary about this. And the way that I think this is super interesting and where the political and religious part intersect with the gender side of things and the cultural and society at large is that she wrote this. So I'm going to read it to you. It's an organized political movement that is bringing tradwives and soft life to our digital doorstep. Women who present traditional homemaking as the ultimate feminine calling, complete with pretty dresses, homemade bread, and total submission to their husbands. And what looks like an innocent lifestyle content is actually part of an organized political movement designed to make patriarchy look cozy and appealing, because politics is downstream from culture. The vibes that influence how we act and live: prairie court, domestic bliss, big sleeves, big or sourdough starters, and beneath it all, the subtle or not so subtle message: a woman's place is in the kitchen, not because she wants to be there, because that's where God or her husband or some TikTok algorithm put her. And this part got me. The tradwife aesthetic promises comfort, but it delivers control. And I thought, damn. Again, some of these kind of fringe, dismissive, kind of, you know, like live your life, live and let live. And that's kind of my position on tradwives or whatever it is. But the political movement and the undertones under it all are, you know, look at how pleasant and happy and joyful my life is. It's almost like a lure to invite people to come in and come back to God, come back to a place of submission where man is in power Let me stay home. I'll make it look pretty. I'll homeschool the kids. I'll do what I need to do and let him handle all of the money stuff. Woo! Cough. And so where does that leave us? It almost is an interesting pit because I've seen a lot of social media content where there is a lot of hatred, or I don't know if the word's hatred, or perhaps vilification of, and this has been forever, right? Like, women who work versus women who don't work. Which one is right? Which one is wrong? And a lot of times the other is underestimated, dismissed, or, and especially there is a big stigma of women who stay home. I don't think there should be a stigma on it, but I notice when somebody asks, so do you work outside the home? Do you work outside the home? It almost is like a judgy, superior posture that doesn't really feel right. And so I have a lot of friends who are stay-at-home moms who really struggle with even just answering those questions, where it almost feels like they are kind of devaluing. Oh, I just work from home. I'm just a homemaker. I'm just a mom. And that breaks my heart. It breaks my heart when people say, I'm just a mom, because it's such an important position. And honestly, if you choose to be home and homeschool your kids and you love it, God bless, I am all for it. I am all for it. My mother, was a stay-at-home mom, and I felt like she was trapped. And so I took a completely different path where, hearing that messaging over and over again for me was like, well, fuck, I'm going to become a workaholic. And I still am today. Does that make me better? No. Does it make me burnt out? Yeah, I am still struggling with burnout. I just am. It just is part of my DNA. And is that going to be the way forever? I don't know. But I'm going to do my damnedest to find a better balance and find a better alignment. Really, I don't know if it's balance. I think it's more alignment. Alignment gives me energy. And like setting boundaries and people pleasing and all of those things. Like, I'm a strong, opinionated, bold woman. I don't struggle, generally speaking or outwardly, with confidence, but I started to notice how much people pleasing that I do. And when somebody asks me, I want to be a kind, giving, generous person. And when somebody asks me to do something, I find myself saying yes when I may not want to, or when it may not be in alignment. So I'm trying to do better in that. But I also feel like that people pleasing tendency is very common for high performing women. And a lot of it is that overproving our worth. Like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think that we've kind of taken on that hustle and grind culture, which to me, that's like my heyday. Like, I can do that all day long. It is the masculine and the feminine energy, right? So the masculine energy I am hyper developed in, which is the do, always giving. Whereas the feminine energy is more receiving. It's more being. It is less doing, right? It is existing. It's being in a receptive position, which is something that I'm actively working towards. And I find that it's hard for women that are trying to figure out, how do I give more? How do I do more? How do I be more? Because there was a formula, right? If you go to school, go to college, work hard, then and get the spouse, the kids, the house, the cars, well, then you'll be set. And we realized, I don't feel set, even though I might have all those things, right? I have everything I want and nothing I need. And so what does that look like? Why do we need to feel like we have not achieved what we want from that? And so I think that discomfort, again, I'm going to bring this back to the avoidance of pain. The avoidance of pain. So let me put this into context. A lot of you are listening to this podcast episode and you're in a job that you don't really like. Maybe you've outgrown it. Maybe you feel like you can do it with your eyes closed. You don't feel challenged anymore. Maybe you feel really challenged. Maybe you feel out of your depths because it may not be the right fit anymore. But the thought of like going out and getting a new job or putting yourself out there or starting that podcast or building that course or starting that company or starting that consulting business, it feels like a lot of work. It feels like pain. And I think all of this is kind of wrapped around the avoidance of pain. Keeps us stuck. It keeps us comfortable. It keeps us in a zone where there'll always be that dull pain of discontent. I don't want to feel discontent anymore. And I think even like the political aspect of all this. And actually, I want to kind of pivot towards relationships and dating because the data on this is so fascinating that, like, from a political standpoint, young men are increasingly leaning right. And they often blame feminism, as I mentioned before, and diversity initiatives for societal issues. And so I think this general malaise and this discomfort, the avoiding pain, has us feeling destabilized and feeling like, where do we even belong? Like, we all are struggling in some way. We are all struggling. I don't think anybody's good, right? I mean, maybe you are for a minute, but it's fleeting. I don't think anybody's like good and has it all figured out and whatever. And if you do, I don't believe you, and I'm not really down. You know, like that's not my vibe. Not that I want to be in struggle, but I don't want to deny that it requires work. And we're a society that loves optimism, opportunity. You know, kids growing up today, they're like, I'm just going to be a millionaire, because they see it. They see it on YouTube. They see, whether it's bullshit or not, it's most likely bullshit. But they see Mr. Beast. They see that one guy who has worked his fucking ass off. But they see the glamour of it all. They see the sexiness of it all. And because we live, I mean, most of my listeners are in the US. Wherever you are, I don't know. But like in the US, we live in a state of perpetual optimism and hope. That is what keeps us up every day, gets us up every day, is hope. And I believe it. We all want to be millionaires. Now there are more billionaires than have ever happened before. But there are a lot of fallout with that too. You know, I think we get blinded and seduced by the shiny objects, thinking that's what we want. But in reality, what we need is connection. And what we don't have is connection, because we are wrapped up chasing things. And what they're finding with men, and even the dating and the relationships thing, because so much of this happens on our phone. You know, you can connect with somebody through the dating apps. You can say yes or no, or swipe left or right, or whatever it is. But you aren't getting rejected anymore. Like, you can hide behind a screen and say, well, fuck her. Fuck that guy. You can hide behind a screen. And so there are all these studies that I think are really interesting of, we don't go for the job because we don't want to get rejected. And so because we never have practice getting rejected, all we're looking for are the shortcut, the hack. I've done enough. Just give me the shortcut. And what I am realizing is that if there was an acceptance that some things require some more time to bake, like you can't microwave your life. And if it is like a get rich quick scheme or a lot of times they're too good to be true. You know, they just are. It isn't, some people are looking for like the next MLM or how do I do ads and affiliates? How do I just get a lot of followers so then I can just not work anymore? The avoidance of pain. How do I just have it be easy? The avoidance of pain. And so we opt out. We decide we're not working. We're not going to get rejected. It's too hard. But if we had stronger connections in our lives, stronger relationships in our lives, and what I've learned, in 6 years of doing this podcast and interviewing people that focus on, professors of social identities, science journalists that talk about how to change people's minds. I've talked to experts on friendships, women-female friendships. And all of them say, all of this takes time. And the only way we get to what we need to is by doing the hard work of having the tough conversations that we normally avoid. And because the internet and our phones make it so easy to just skip right over the hard parts. When you think about friendships, I was at a dinner last night and I was talking to this woman who is a prominent surgeon here in Atlanta. She's beautiful and she is kind of new to Atlanta. And I asked her, have you found your people here? And she's like, no, it's the hardest thing is to meet people because it requires a commitment and it requires like an intentional investment that I don't know that we've ever been taught. We've been taught like almost to boundary up. And I've been guilty of this too. Like I've been burned in friendships and I've been so deeply hurt that I put up all of the walls and said, I'm just going to be pleasant. Again, we're back to the 90s, girl. I'm just going to be pleasant, funny, and smart, and hopefully, provide value and get the fuck out. Like George, right? George from Seinfeld. What's his name? Not George Stephanopoulos. George Costanza. Like George Costanza, you leave them laughing, you leave them on a high. And that is literally how I have led my life over the past few years, afraid to get close to anybody because I didn't want to get hurt. But the reason why I got hurt is because I kept my mouth shut and I didn't ask for what I wanted. I didn't put myself out there in a way that I wanted to. So I was working with my coach, Dara, and we had our first meeting. And I thought this was so powerful that we were talking. And the reason why I hired Dara is because I wanted to have some coaching around my business. So she's a life and business coach. And in her intake form, she was talking about friendships and just all aspects of my life. And I had put, and this is very true, I talk about it a lot, that I have a lot of shame and embarrassment that I don't have a best friend. I have really amazing people in my life, and people, if I'm mad, I know who to call. People who, if I need support or help in a business idea, plenty of people to call, plenty of people to hang out. But if I'm sad, I don't know who I would call. I don't know. Because I don't want to burden them, right? Like this is it. Like we're the fixers. These high-performing women, we're the fixers. We are used to solving other people's problems, but we don't always identify or even admit when we might need help until we're like on the ground broken, right? We're on our bathroom floor with a tile on our face with tears streaming down, the tiles because we're having a breakdown. That's when we're like, okay, I need help. You wave the white flag. But I think that avoidance of pain aspect of it is something we need to take the lens off. So that's kind of some backstory on on the friendship piece of it, but it is something that I really am deeply working towards. And so Dara, in her brilliance, in her infinite brilliance, said, when we had our very first meeting, she's like, I read through your intake form, and I know you have interest in growing your business and figuring out what to do and where to spend your time and what you should spend money on, like all the things, right? But I noticed this thing about friendship. And I thought we could start there because they're always interconnected. Usually that thing that you're struggling with personally is what blocks what you want professionally. And I'm like, damn, she's good. And she told me, I'm going to share it with you. It's kind of vulnerable, but it was so brilliant and I felt so seen. And she said, you know what? I have been there before, Allison. And I made a decision that when I would meet somebody and I would vibe with them, right? Like, it's not like I'm just looking for anybody to hang out with. Like, I'm looking for somebody that I can feel safe to let my guards down. Not just somebody to go on vacation with, although I want that too, but somebody that's like your ride or die, like somebody you're like going through the shit together with, right? Somebody that you think about and deeply care about and have fights with or whatever it is, right? Like you're working through life together. We always think about it in the sense of a romantic partnership, and it is really important. Like, my biggest lesson with my husband, who is the motherfucking shit, like my husband, as far as I'm concerned, hung the moon. I am the most proud of everything that I've done. I am the most proud of our marriage and choosing to marry him. When I met him, I dumped him after 2 weeks because he was too nice and I wasn't used to that bullshit, but I came to my senses a couple of months later, and he just has been the best thing I've ever done. And really the biggest lesson I learned with him especially is, how well do you fight together? Not how well do you get along? How well do you fight? That we're always in it together. So even when we have disagreements, right? But the same thing goes with our friendships. And essentially what we do is, like, if we hit some bumps in the road and we're like, well, I guess that's it, and we don't say anything about it. And I think this truly is the challenge. This is the challenge, is our friendships. I think this is not just the challenge. I think it is the solution, is the way that we connect with people that we either disagree with or whatever it is, or maybe we had a relationship at some point and it changed. And Dara, my coach, had told me, what I did when I would meet somebody that I would vibe with and just felt like there was something more there, I would be really upfront about it. And I would say, I am looking for like a real best friend. I'm looking for I know this is going to sound a little bit off the wall, and it's okay if it's not your thing, but I want a really deep friendship. And I don't, if you're looking for something that is like we get together once a quarter for dinner or just check in, that's not really what I'm looking for. Like, I'm looking for somebody that is going to go deep and like really actively pursue each other as friends. And if that's something you're interested in, I'd love to explore. And if not, it's perfectly fine. And she was telling me, I was like, wow, I never even thought of that. And I was like, well, what happened? And she said, you would be amazed that this happened a couple of times with some people that I just really felt connected to and wanted to get to know more, that they were like, wow, I so appreciate that. They were caught off guard, but in a really great way. And the expectations were kind of set in the beginning. And you could kind of leave an opportunity to talk to each other and to talk about the hard stuff. Again, here we are with the avoidance of pain. And I want to go back again to the dating. I know I'm a little bit all over the place, but it all makes sense, right? There are a lot of challenges in modern dating. And essentially what's happening, remember we talked about the incels, that there's nobody to date. Here's the reality. The women that have done the work, they're 60%, 60-40 women to men in college campuses and universities today. For the first time ever, it has been flipped. And there are more women that are working, that are self-sufficient. And the question of, are there good men out there? And there are less. That's the challenge. So like women out there who are dating and they're like, there are not a lot of guys that can match what I can offer. And I want somebody who can be equal. And so it is like 80% is trying to find the 20% of people that can fit in their category. And so I think the reason why I wanted to do this episode is because I wanted to provide a compassionate context for why people are feeling destabilized, why people are feeling dismissed, overlooked, feel scared, feel like there is more out there, but they don't know how to get there. Like nothing is certain anymore. Nothing is certain. Nothing feels like a steady rock. And maybe for you, that might be church. Maybe for you, that might be your family. And I would hold on to where you feel stabilized, which again is interesting that there is a movement of younger people that are going back to church because they want to feel what is true. And I think what's challenging for us is that we don't know what to believe. You know, the right tells us the media is effing it all up and they're, poisoning our minds. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. Why do you believe who you get your news from or who you get your information from? And usually it has everything to do with the tribe in which you belong. This is where I think this is super interesting, is that there is all of this data that shows that social death is a far greater and scarier risk than actual death. And think about like vaccine hesitancy. And there was so much going on of like, you wore a mask and all of a sudden you're an asshole for wearing a mask. You don't belong anymore, right? Or you aren't my people. And so that divisiveness is really, it is that way, right? It is that way. I mean, if you're driving a Cybertruck, you might as well just have a MAGA hat, right? Running around. That it just is. And I know I'm making broad generalizations, but I'm doing this because that's how we operate. We are literally looking for stereotypes and patterns to figure out, are we safe? Is there an avoidance of pain? Or are these my people? Are these my people? Are these people where I can let my guards down? And so finding all of this, like the challenges in modern dating, I know it's not the most exciting, or promising thing of like finding dating. But in some ways, you just have to get away from the screen and reconnect and like recommit to prioritizing and reprioritizing your friendships and your personal connections beyond the screens, beyond just a text, and like going out of your way, even when you're tired. I am guilty of this too. Like if I make plans and I commit to something, I am so thrilled when you cancel. I really am. Like I would rather stay home, or I'm tired, or I can do something else. So, and that's just, we are exhausted, but I think we need to plug into where we're energized. And the only place this gets better is through our connections. When it comes to men and women, political division, religious leanings, hypocrisy in a lot of churches, and even the meaning of, what is this all about? And all of it says that it really is the people that you connect with, the people. You got to get out of the comfort zone. You got to do the thing that you keep putting off. You got to do the thing that makes you feel uncomfortable. You got to go out and risk rejection. Because the more you risk rejection, the more you get, right? Like Sarah Blakely always talks about, the founder of Spanx, always talks about her dad. Every single day when her and her brother would come home from school and they would have dinner, he would say, "What did you fail at today? What did you fail at today? What are we celebrating?" And they would tell them, "I, flunked this, or I made a mistake here." And he would cheer them on. And really, the reason why he did that, first of all, Sarah Blakely and her husband, Jesse Itzler, who has been on this podcast, they're not afraid of being embarrassed. They're not afraid of rejection. And they get a ton of rejection, right? You don't get to that level without a shit ton of rejection. But that comfort zone, it fucking sucks, right? That's what keeps us stuck. We don't ever want you in the land of maybe. We want you in the land of yes or no. So kind of tuning into your body of what feels aligned and focusing on the relationships. So if this conversation hit a nerve, good. It means you're awake or you're woke. The state of the sexes, this is playing out in boardrooms, in bedrooms, dinner tables, and dating apps. And if you want to build something meaningful in your business, in your relationships, or your leadership, then understanding why we've ended up here gives you some serious power. And if you're working through any of this in your own brand or personal reinvention, especially as a thought leader trying to kind of articulate your place in a shifting culture, I want to help you find the words and the structure and the mic to say what only you can say. And you can book a free strategy call with me to help you do that at AllisonHair.com/free call. Let's make your message land clearly, powerfully, and unapologetically. And honestly, I thank you for your time and your interest and your attention with this. I would love to hear your feedback on this. I know I touched on probably a lot of nerves, and I would love it to hear from you, but I would love it even more if you shared this in your circles. Who are the people that are struggling and trying to figure out, where do I even belong here? Please send this to them. And I would love it if you would leave a review. And you can go to Apple Podcasts, and if you scroll all the way down, go to Reinvention Room, you're probably there, go all the way down, click on the 5 stars, and then a little text box will pop up. Write a sentence or two. And it's essentially what it does is it helps me in the algorithm. It helps people find me. And what that helps is the more you share this, the more the culture changes. Because this is the conversations that we need to be having more. So thank you. If you liked today's episode, there are several ways to support the show. I produce this show myself, so it helps me continue to make it. First, please rate and review the show on the platform where you listen, and consider sharing this episode with a friend or 5. That's how it grows, by sharing these ideas. Second, please sign up for my email where I send out a short personal note to you every week, and always with a sprinkle of snark and some best finds. You can sign up at AllisonHair.com/email. As always, thanks for listening and hanging out with me in the Reinvention Room.